Welcome back to another episode of People and AI, where we explore the intersection of human ingenuity and artificial intelligence. Today, we have the privilege of speaking with Birago Jones, the CEO and co-founder of Pienso, a platform dedicated to democratizing AI by empowering non-technical users to build and deploy machine learning models with ease. Birago, so much for joining us today. Really excited to have you on. Perhaps we can start with tell us a little bit more about Pienso, what you guys do, and why is that important?
Sure. Thanks so much for the time being on your show. Pienso, you can think of it as an interactive AI platform. So it's no code from the model creation and manipulation standpoint, meaning we want to provide subject matter experts the ability to, without code, to create small models, fine-tune large language models to their heart's content. They're the subject matter expert, and what we learned from our research, my co-founder and I, we were at MIT a long time ago and no one cared about this stuff. We had a class project and we were just trying to figure out, could we use machine learning to mitigate the problems of cyberbullying on social networks like Facebook? And that class project mushroomed into many years later, what is now Pienso. But what's important about what we found from that research was that the person that understands the data best, the subject matter expert, is really the person that should be training the model. There's no reason why someone who's an expert in, atypical angina or heart-related stress for women, doctor sitting on top of me, looking at a delimited list of text inside a notebook, and I'm just asking word after word after word, what does this mean to you? What does this mean to you? What does this mean to you? What does this cluster of words mean to you? That's just really silly. So we created a user interface to enable that subject matter expert to be able to do it on themselves. And that's what's really, really important to us. And then if the subject matter expert's the one creating in concert that model in real time, then what you get is you get the model that best represents and is imbued with the subject matter expert's understanding about the use case, the data, or the intended use or expectations for the use of that model. And we think that's probably a better barometer for success than just an F1 score or some statistical analysis just basically says this model should be 98% excellent at accomplishing some given task. And that's so that's on the no-code side. On the low-code side, listen, data science teams are overwhelmed. They've got tons of things to do for their organization, and we're just trying to make sure that for the analysis of text-based data, that Pienso can serve as a way to turbocharge those efforts. Get your subject matter experts in your organization to create the models, have them check it, have them test to their heart's content, do A/B testing, then deploy those models. And deploy means the subject matter expert either creating an API key and connecting it to data, or having the data science team do that. It really doesn't matter to us. What's most important is that we want to give that agency and empowerment to our customers. And then more importantly, we don't want to see the data. We're just kind of training people on how to use the platform, and then we step away. There's no business part of our business model that says that we gain anything from seeing the data, so we don't want to.
Interesting. So maybe just a tangent with this, sort of applications or users, like where would the Pienso platform be applied, for instance?
Sure. So you can think of Pienso as being lower on the technical stack. So it's not a SaaS product in itself, because it's not like CRM plus AI. It's the AI portion or the layer of analysis that uses the models to look at the data that's coming out of these data-driven programs, creating some kind of analysis or insights, and then putting those insights into the applications for which the users will then act on. Our biggest use case, we call FOSS, or Fast Organized Sift to Search. It means you've got a large data feed of of text-based data. It might be user text messages, social posts. It could be, Dow Jones Newswire. It's deluge of incoming data feeds, and you want to make sense of it. And so the first thing you want to do is probably want to organize it, create some kind of structure out of it. And then after creating some organization, then you want to do some other tasks like summarize it or pick out the entities or keywords or things that you're interested in, key points of interest that you're interested in. That's kind of what Pienzo is good for. Our largest commercial client right now is Sky UK. The customer insights group, they use Pienzo to create models to analyze their customer calls. And so all the calls, 500 plus thousand calls every single day, get transcribed and put through the models that they create on our platform. And then they generate insights everywhere from who's going to churn to what's the challenges or issues of the day that need to be addressed. Can I create an ontology of risk over time? These kinds of things.
That's amazing. Now, obviously, a lot of work has gone into where you are today, as you said, the first version from when it started to the iterations that you've gone through. So maybe let's start there, right, as well. So you've spoken about your time at MIT Media Lab and the project being sort of pivotal, the social media and content moderation work that you were doing, leading you to essentially the creation of Pienzo. So maybe walk us through that journey. How did you come upon where did you start? How did you come upon the problem, and how you arrived at the current iteration of Pienzo?
Sure. So my co-founder Karthik and I, Karthik, great name by the way, we were in a class together, and so we were just trying to figure out, could we help mitigate some of the issues of social networks looking at problematic posts. So there's a lot of cyberbullying going on at the time. And so how do you know when a post is, or an assertion from a user is bad or good, or is a bullying nature? And so we went to go look at creating some models, and all the training data at the time, again, this is like 2010, it was based on the Wall Street Journal. And as you know, teens don't speak in the vernacular of the Wall Street Journal. And so with human speech, as many, even the layperson knows, bad means good, good means interesting, interesting means not interested at all. That kind of disambiguation is best figured out by a human, not necessarily just a model finding a pattern. With teen speech, it's even more exasperated because that nomenclature is shifting all the time. And so we created our own training set. We had a great opportunity from the class to go to the White House to meet President Obama and present our work in 2011. It was really late one night, and we were trying to figure out, can we get this project going? And Karthik says, Birago, the model keeps bringing all these false positives. I said, what false positives? What do you mean? He's like, well, it's finding instances of bullying that are problematic speech, but it's challenges, but there's not really, it's pretty benign. So it was getting late, so I said, well, why don't you read me some of the assertions? And so there was a conversation between two girls, and one girl says to her friend, my boyfriend keeps wanting me to give up the goods, meaning pressure for sex. And the algorithm found it, and that was pretty mind-blowing to us. But for Karthik, who wasn't so familiar with American teen vernacular, he didn't think that was problematic, so he thought it was benign. So he thought it was like a false positive. And then we found all these other kinds of instances of like whether it was goth or emu or the other kinds of nuanced American teen vernacular was being misinterpreted, either positively by the algorithm or negatively by Karthik, or vice versa. And so what we've realized is that you really need to have an expert there. And I think that's the same can be said in any enterprise. The vernacular of any given customer or company is different than even the nearest competitor. So that the language and nomenclature of the brand for Arab Emirates is probably slightly different than Southwest. And when you're trying to analyze text, you want to have a model that can accommodate that nuance. And where does that nuance come from? Well, large language models and using prompts are great, but they don't capture everything. And so what our platform really helps people to do is what we learned was that you want to incorporate that subject matter expert at the time of training. Help train that model, and then when that model gets trained, you have a much better, richer, more nuanced understanding of the data that's going to analyze. And that's what we found in our class project.
That's amazing. And the things that you discover in school and how useful can they be. I remember my very first my master's thesis. I mean, this is I'm dating myself, but a while ago, at least ended up becoming a product for a startup. And this is the early 2000s, so it was not. It's interesting how many things that students and research labs work on that actually have real world application if you actually keep focusing on it, iterating on it. So, how was your journey from going in from a lab environment to making this into a full blown company? I mean, there's a lot of students today who are working on AI. It is the next revolution, and so there are probably tons of students who are working on some really cool, interesting things that they could actually bring value to to all of us, right? And so, what could you share a little bit about that journey and maybe as a sort of a pointer to students as they work on these projects themselves?
Sure. I think the one insight that I have, hindsight looking back, is that the reason Pienso emerged is because all the tenets of Pienso we were trying to solve for a specific outcome. We weren't really worried about can we create interactive AI or interactive machine learning. What we were trying to figure out is what is the best way to get input from the human that has the most understanding, most nuanced understanding about some subject. In this case, it was bullying. How do I imbue that into an algorithm that's going to be looking for patterns of that? And that was what my co-founder Karthik was really focused on. I was focused on a side note was just how do you reflect that back to the user to let the user know how it understands, how the algorithm or the model understands your input. And so you put those two things together, and that's what we created, that interactivity or interactive AI. How it relates to being a researcher is that starting with a kind of a goal, it doesn't necessarily have to be a mission because we're in school and so we're exploring, but it's having a goal and then trying to be creative enough to use the resources around you as tools and then build upon those things to kind of satisfy the target or the goal that you're trying to achieve. And then when you're using technology, and then the next thing is, can you scale it? And scaling it is a much, it's not an easy problem, but it's a much easier thing to do than to figure out value. So if you've already found out value, then I think it's much easier for people to get people behind you to help you scale, because lots of people know how to scale. Not everyone knows how to define value. So I would say start there.
Excellent point. And so I'm sure that journey wasn't easy,
No.
right? There's so walk us through some of those challenges, like, and how did you overcome them?
Some of the biggest challenges were that lots of the things that we were working on, they weren't ready for production, meaning they weren't ready to be put in the enterprise. And so we were learning along the way. But one of the things that we've also found is that the ability to find within our network super amenable first pilot customers. You know, I just put a plug for MIT. They were really good at helping us find those kind of customers that we could say, okay, I'm willing to spend the time with you because I can already see the value in the future. So I'll spend the time now to help you work out how to put this into production. There's no, now there's lots and lots of tools that can help you to deploy a model or find the right model to start from. I mean, you just go on Hugging Face and Leaderboard is littered with things that you can start with, and there's any Google search will pull up any platforms that you might want to utilize. But when you're building them years ago, it just wasn't easy, and so it started with what's the goal, and then let's just work on that goal and then build the platform around that. And then as we were working, we found, you know what, we need to add this feature. We need to add this feature. We need to add this feature. This is no longer tenable, but just being very judicious and prudent about how we choose what features that we would start to work on, because we were always a small team. And that's the other thing is that, if you're, I guess maybe one advice is that when you go to raise money, if you raise $10, then you're going to be expected to spend $10 immediately. So if you raise $100, you're going to spend $100 immediately. So have a clear plan about what you want to do, and then figure out how much money it takes to spend that, and then try to raise under that, just so that way it creates the negative side of that, it creates a cycle where you're always raising money or you're always needing money because you need to expand your resources. But on the positive side, it keeps you grounded and you always are building something, and then you have something to show. And I think that was one thing that we learned from MIT. At the time of our lab, it was demo or die. I mean, the nomenclature's changed now. But the point is that, the value of your time is based on the artifact that you create at the end of it. So you got to create an artifact if you really want to talk about it. And that was really a great kind of ethos to have into building a company, because we were like, okay, great. We've got some money. We've got some resources. We've got some human resources. We're going to build something. So at the end of this time period, we should have something built that creates value. And so that's one of the things that we've been really focusing and refocusing on, because that's kind of our ethos.
I think I cannot agree more. And I would like to stress that point significantly, which is don't raise more money than you need.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Because there's scarcity brings a certain level of hunger. And it sharpens the focus, right? To keep on the objective, the end goal, and to your point, output driven, right? Like you have to have an output that you can prove, and I think it's always the amount of money you raise sometimes becomes a vanity metric,
Yes.
where it's like I raised 10, I raised 20, I raised 100, and some businesses legitimately need that. I think for some of the, let's say, large language model companies, I mean, the amount of compute that they guzzle up and amount they have
Yes.
to pay, you absolutely need, some heavy dollars behind you to compete for that compute. But to your point, I think it comes down to raise only as much as you need, and maybe a little bit less even. So that's a fantastic point. And I think the second point, right? I think it was subtly put, which is, regardless of the term, like demo or die. I mean, going through that cycle of ensuring that every iteration, every sprint leads to something that's incremental. Always learning, but also incorporating that and putting out software that's actually valuable. I think again that also sharpens your focus on what you do. So couldn't agree more on all those points. But curious, right? So from this sort of, what does it take to take this sort of let's assume it's an MVP of an MVP. So it's a project, right? So it's not really production level code. And now here you are with some impressive suite of clients. I mean, I think the broadcast giant Sky that you mentioned, and a few others. What does it take to go from there to have a platform that is consumable by a large enterprise?
Well, I think if it's we hone in on what the value we would be producing, built for that, and then expand it out from there. Meaning that we didn't overbuild and then not have the ability to deploy that at scale. If that makes any sense. One challenge that we found was that when we were working with Sky, for instance, they had used everybody prior to us, and hadn't got the results. I'm just saying this one group had used everyone, hadn't got the results they were looking for, started using us, and we started small. It's always easy as a company to say, hey, listen, I got you as a client. How much money can I get out of you as quickly as possible? Because I don't know where the next money is going to come from. And I want to lock you into something. And, you know, it's like kind of like that fake it till you make it, or, you know, don't worry about it. It's MVP. The problem with MVP and AI is that the MVP of AI is AI. And so either it works or it doesn't work.
Exactly.
And so it's pretty humbling. It's in the sense that when it does work, this is amazing. This is great. Now let's move forward to the next step. So it's step by step by step by step. Each step we take moving forward, create more value. Each step creating forward, take more value. Each step creating forward, create more value. Then that gave our customers the trust that they're really looking for. You know, when everyone is now looking at AI going, we need to have some kind of AI strategy, there's hundreds of people within the company and several different groups doing the exact same thing. They're looking at all of the big hyperscalers. They're looking at all of the startups that they possibly could find. And they're saying, who should we use? And really, I think what you can see across the industry is that there's not so many success stories. So with Sky, Sky won Ofcom Award, which is their version of the least complained about company, telecom company, or best in customer service, I guess another way to describe it. They did that using Pienzo because they were able to shave the time per call down. They were able to support their customers in ways that actually created value, and they were able to know kind of ahead of time what were the challenges they were going to be facing, and then plan accordingly. Sky also started using us to supplement the use of and almost eliminate the use of Net Promoter Score, meaning that they were analyzing each of the calls in such a nuanced way that they didn't have to send that after action survey report that says, you know, how did Birago do helping you with the customer service? Well, Birago is nice, but I hate the, you know, the remote TV remote. That's not very helpful. What you want is a nuanced understanding about the conversation and what were the challenges and how did the agent support them. That's what's really important. And so again, creating value step by step, slowly, methodically. That's how we were able to do it. Our other set of customers are in the U.S. government. They're not very. Their use case is not dissimilar. They've got tons and tons of news articles that they want to read. Not everyone can read them, so they create models based on their interests. They use that interest to determine like what's going on in current events and what should we be looking for, those kinds of things. And so when you can put that I won't say power, but yeah, power into the model creation, into the hands of the person who is really the subject matter expert, that gives a lot of agency rather than waiting around for a data science team to say, hey, can you give me something? And we got that experience from working with Sky and working with their teams. And so the question is, how do you move from MVP to enterprise? Obviously code hardening, code checking, all those things get great talent, write the best code. That's all great. But I think when you wrap it around making sure that you're providing value for the customers, then the customers will gave us the leeway to say, okay, this is not exactly where we need it. We want it to use it in this method, or we've got this kind of data feed coming in. Can you help us? This kind of structure that we need. We need to populate this kind of data lake. More than happy to do that. And if we're not there yet, they'll have the patience to give us the time to get that done.
Focusing on value and output is so critical. And I think we keep going back to that. But maybe let's double click a little bit on the Pienso platform itself, Birago. So from everything I understand, so the customer has a bunch of unstructured data, structured or unstructured, right? It gets ingested into the Birago platform. Now, there's a bunch of issues there, right? Transformations of these data into a format that you can consume, labeling with the features. So that's one aspect of it. So I have a bunch of questions there, like how does that work? Second, we know, that what is it going to? Is it a generative AI model? Are you using your own models? It's like where that data model to some objective, right? And so you're saying, well, you can define the objective function of the model, the output you're looking for, and the model sort of learns how to get to that output by self-training itself, right? So semi-supervised learning, because the human in the loop keeps correcting the model until it gets to the right answer more often than not. So the accuracy of the model improves. Now, look, I can absolutely see the value to your point, where data scientists, we're not having to rely on a data scientist to create these little agents that can work for you. Like we're now moving to this agentic world. I can absolutely see the application of Pienso there. But maybe walk us through exactly what's happening in the background, right? Right. So from the data transformations, and what are we actually training with that data, and how do you set that objective function, which can vary by user and use case?
Oh, great question. So there's three basic areas of our platform, and so there's the ingestion, prepping the data for models. Then second is the model tuning or creation. So you want to create a small model to do, I don't know, larger data annotation. They can do that, or you just want to fine tune something. We have, as part of our platform, many of the open source large language models that everyone wants to use. Everything from BERT and BART up to Llama. We've kind of pre-tuned them to work really efficiently on our platform. But you are right. There is the semi-supervised portion is that you don't need the entirety of the internet, a model based on the internet, to be able to address your use case. So you kind of need to pare it down. So sometimes it's the fine tuning that's important, or sometimes you can just use a small model to do the exact same thing. Regardless of what you do, once you have the models that you want to use, deploy means basically connect it to a data source, then tell the platform where to send the insights. And so the insights can go to, I don't know, maybe it's the notes for Salesforce or your CRM, or maybe it's to something that's outputting for the Bloomberg terminal. I don't really know. But what's important is that you're analyzing some data based on those models. In the platform, what we give is we give the subject matter expert the ability to test prior to actual deployment. So being able to test makes sure that the user knows that it works. And to your point, whether it's creating the prompts, we have tools that for that also, because who really wants to write prompts? And communicating with a model is not the same as communicating with your friends or your colleagues in business. And so we're working with a bank, and they have people that work on the trading floor, and they say, it's easier for me to call my guy who knows about coffee than it is to create a prompt and see, can I analyze some data on coffee, and then wait some amount of time to figure out, are the answers I'm getting returned back, or do they make any sense or not? It's just way faster for me to call my friend my colleague who knows everything on coffee. Really the same way. Pienzo is a structured way of being able to have that subject matter expert get to their insights. And so if you want summaries, many times it's not just one summary, it's summarized based on this kind of slant of perspective, summarized based on this. We want to support the users in doing that. And so we have a number of tools. One tool we have is called Prompt Factory, allows you to create structured prompts in a way and then deploy them the same way you would deploy models, so that you can create a deployment package, so that you can say, I've got a fine-tuned version of this model. These are the prompts I want to use, and this is the data that I want to feed, that I want to analyze on a regular basis. And here's where I want to send that analysis to, whether it's Google Data Studio, Tableau, or whatever your dashboard or data-driven program is.
Super interesting. That explains a lot. So if I hear you right, the underlying LLM or the model that's used there's a choice, right? So you can pick the best of breed sort of LLM model, but you created pared down versions of these for yourself or for the Pienzo platform, right? I think part of what you're also saying is, in the models that you use, you don't necessarily need to take a bulky model at all, but take a pared down version, because you just need it for your custom sort of use case, a lightweight version of the model that understands enough about the world that is useful to you.
That's correct.
Excellent. And so in this, like, where do you see the biggest barriers for enterprises, right? Or enterprise or companies that are trying to adopt AI? Obviously, you've got a pretty big install base of clients, or growing install base of clients as well. Where do you see that enterprises are facing a challenge? And I'll ask you this. The reason I ask this as well is, I'm sure you read the paper or the post from Sequoia last week, where they've highlighted that $600 billion have gone into funding AI companies, and right now the revenue does not match up at all. And so and if you take maybe OpenAI, $3.5 billion. I mean, nowhere closer than $600 billion, but that's just OpenAI. Let's take all the companies together. Maybe we're hitting about $20 billion. If you take globally, every AI company, startup or otherwise, putting dollars to work. So obviously, this requires enterprises to start adopting faster, so we can monetize this, so we don't hit another AI winter. That's one of my concerns. So, in your experience, what are some of the biggest barriers enterprises are facing, and how could they, or should we be helping them overcome them?
That's such a great question. One barrier to entry, I think, is no one has really, and I mean universally no one, not no one, but universally no one has really thought of the GPU cost. Mm-hmm. The cost of GPU is people can afford. That's why people are buying them. Great. The cost of acquiring them and then putting them to use is a little bit different. And so there is do you, as an enterprise, most enterprises have all three of the major hyperscalers. Like they have an Azure cloud, they have a Google cloud, they have an Amazon cloud. They also have on-prem. And then they decide that they want to use AI, and then they've decided, okay, now who is responsible for figuring out where the models will reside, where the platforms that are going to be doing this analysis, and where does the data go, the analysis go for the data that I've just analyzed. Meaning, does it go back to the same places? Because what we're personally finding is that every enterprise is now, while they're trying to figure out the AI strategy, they're also trying to figure out, okay, well, are we going to go back from the cloud? Are we moving back to on-prem, or you know, we're going to stay in Google, or we're going to stay in, the cloud? That's one big challenge. And if they decide that's a challenge, then it's the availability. And so on the cloud side, everyone's excited that I'm pausing because I just professionally trying to make sure I don't
It's all right. Say it
say anything
as you
wrong.
feel it.
But
Yes.
yeah, but what I would say is that the challenge of where my data resides and where the platform that's analyzing that data is a big one. So if your most valuable data is on-prem and you have to copy it and send it somewhere else on the cloud to wherever some other platform is, that's almost a non-starter for most IT security people.
So
So
that's
the
interesting.
way,
Yeah, sorry. And maybe I'll
no,
just
I would
check with it.
just,
Yeah, sorry.
yeah, because this is kind of like where your space is, which is pretty pretty funny.
No, yeah, I mean, the risk of models, I mean, I think that there's data residency and data privacy issues, certainly. Um, the other big risk that we see is the actual model functioning itself, right? And where it can go off the rails, and the liabilities associated with it. Like we know of companies where the AI heads coming to us saying, look, our legal and compliance teams won't let us launch these models because even though they work, but they're worried about the liabilities, right? So that, I mean, and part of it is the data liability, the privacy issues, and what if the model hallucinates out private information if that's what was trained on, right? Um, you know, and maybe I don't know if you want to comment on this. So OpenAI has a strategy. I believe OpenAI strategy is we have an API. We will ensure that your data doesn't get sucked into our bigger, larger mothership of a model. Your data will remain in your version of GPT, but we will host that, right? Versus, someone like Cohere, whose strategy is we will take our model, package it, and put it into your enterprise environment, wherever that may be. So we will never see your data, but you get to use the power of the model. Do you think that that's the winning strategy then, what Cohere has versus what OpenAI does?
I think our strategy is the best,
Excellent
which is
answer.
just like, which is whatever the customer feels most comfortable with. That's where Pienzo resides.
Right.
You want us to reside in the cloud, then it's in your tenant of the cloud. So it's not Pienzo multi-tenant. It's just Pienzo resides in your cloud. You want to reside on-prem, then you install Pienzo wherever on-prem means for you. I think that's the only way that you're going to be able to quell the issues, because rather than add an extra security concern, we would rather just fold into the environment that you feel the most comfortable with. So if you don't have
Excellent.
any issues, then Pienzo doesn't have any issues because we're inside your environment. House rules, your house rules.
Excellent. I think that's the right answer, right? Having the flexibility to do it either way. Um,
Yeah.
now, with maybe switching gears a little bit and zooming out, obviously LLMs have kind of sparked, or generative models, let's put it that way, have expanded this AI market, or made it much more exciting because consumers can experience it. It's much more tangible than maybe 6 years ago. Um, but where do you feel AI research is headed? Or what's the next trend or advancement in AI that you're excited about over the next 5 to 10 years that would keep, the sort of these transformational improvements in the capabilities of these models?
Well, I would say that it's going to be what's exciting to me is that AI makes it so that content, interesting content, has more value. A live person experience is probably the most exciting, exotic experience now moving forward, because it's the thing that humans can interact with, and they have the both agency, it's a malleable experience that gives you the delight, the excitement, the awe, because you don't actually know what's going to happen. And I think that's what's exciting about AI. On the technological side, is it just means that for the things that are difficult to look up and discover, it's making the aperture much smaller. And so there should be, for certain things, we should not be wondering how to do something. We should have the ability to, through our various different affordances and devices, be able to get to an answer very, very quickly, as an individual. As a company, I think it's going to be there's some restructuring that has to happen to be able to take advantage of those affordances. Like, we have layers upon layers of resources that may not be useful anymore, or to have the same utility, that need to be repurposed.
Yeah, no, I think that's well said. We're coming up on time, so I'd love to, wrap this up with, what message would you like to leave the audience with about the future of AI and the role Pienso will play in it?
From a business standpoint, it shouldn't cost an arm and a leg to deploy large language models or models of AI of any kind. You should have the agency to do that. You should be empowered to do that on your own. And you should not rent a model that you donated your data to. But I think from more high level, my co-founder always says, he says that something we learned from MIT is demo die is one thing, but it's just the other part is that it's the human creativity that's really going to expand the affordances of what we can do with AI. If we're just worried about counting things, summarizing things, and high-level numeric prediction, that's great. But I think something more creative things can be found in this power that we'll be able to use for good. And it'll just going to take more people to be involved. And so the more that platforms are able to involve the subject matter experts in that process, the better off we'll be.
Amazing. Well said. I think that's one of the best messages anyone's left us with so far. So, thank you for that. No, I truly do mean that. I think what you guys are doing is I think it's really cool. So more power to you. Congrats on the $10 million round that I think you just closed and raised.
Thank you.
And hopefully this will help you build Pienso to the next level, and looking forward to seeing the Series B. And anything we can do to help, I would love to stay in touch. And parting question: where can our listeners learn more about Pienso and keep up with your work? If you want to leave the address and if they want to get in touch with you, how should they do so?
Yeah, it's the website's the easiest.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Simple as that. And I'm sure they can find you on LinkedIn as well.
Yes.
So thank you, Birago. It was a real pleasure to have you on, and looking forward to having you on again, maybe in a year's time, and learn all the great things and amazing things that Pienso will be up to.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate the time.
Awesome. Thanks, Birago.